This is the beautiful and very quiet little village of Aldbourne in Wiltshire, which 80 years ago became home to a battalion of US paratroopers who were preparing to take part in the D-Day landings. One of these men, David Kenyon Webster, recorded his memories in a recently discovered manuscript.
One day, Aldbourne was asleep with her cows and her memories. The next, she was tingling with 6 companies of wild young Yankees given to jumping from airplanes in flight.
This was the famous Easy Company, otherwise known as the Band of Brothers. They took up residence in nissen huts, in tar and paper huts, in camps in the villages, as well as in stable blocks, private houses, and lovely pubs like that one.
Our good friend Richard Osgood, the Chief Archaeologist at the Ministry of Defence, has been working at this site since 2019, and this year Time Team is really pleased to join him and his team for the full 8 days as we try and unravel and understand how this sleepy Wiltshire village became a training ground for those brave soldiers for D-Day.
The men arrived at Aldbourne after undergoing rigorous training in Camp Toccoa at the base of Mount Currahee, which inspired their famous Currahee battle cry. A scrapbook gives us insight into the experience of these young volunteers as they prepared to be dropped into the battlefields of Europe, not knowing who would make it home. It describes gruesome conditions on the crossing from New York to Liverpool, their first glimpses of England on the train to Hungerford, and their arrival at the camp by torchlight. Webster picks up the story.
We arrived in Aldbourne in a blacked-out convoy one frosty September night in 1943. When we awoke the next morning, we saw the England of nursery rhyme and children's story. Fairy tale cottages with thatched roofs and rose vines on trellises stood all around us.
80 years later, our team of archaeologists and veterans are anxious to uncover the next chapter of their story.
We're looking for nissen huts, and we're looking for maybe different styles of hut. This is the hub. This is what makes Easy Company. This is the origins of Easy Company before they go and do all their fighting in Europe. They've done no fighting before they start living here. So they're eating in the mess houses. They are sleeping. There are about 16 people in one of these huts. So quite cramped, and I think it must have been pretty cold, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And they're doing everything that makes them soldiers here.
Right. But they were only here from September 43 to May 44, so it's less than a year in total.
Yeah, that's right.
What can we hope that they might have left behind for us?
What I'd really like to find out is what keeps them human. Because they're doing all this training for horrific world events that were completely essential bits of training. But, what about the downtime that they had? Working and living with the locals, trying to make the best of the rations that they're getting. So I'd really like to find out the personal stories, and if we could find any traces of an individual. I mean, the great thing about this is that we do have a lot of photographs as well of the particular individuals that were here. There's a nice one there.
Oh yeah.
The chap on the back, sitting on the bike seat, is called Forrest Guth, and he's a Pennsylvanian, and a lot of Easy Company did come from that eastern state of America, big industrial estate, so even people like Dick Winters, the commanding officer in the end, he's from that state. And you can see he's sat on the bike, but he's in front of one of the sort of things we are looking for. We are looking for these nissen huts, these prefabricated buildings, and hopefully we'll find traces of, the hut just behind Forrest Guth.
Yep. And you have a plan of the area?
Yeah, now this is an intriguing one because this was done by memory from one of the veterans of Easy Company. And you'll notice they've got the kind of queues here, and that's Quonset.
Right.
That's the American term for a nissen hut.
Okay.
So you've got all of these, and the person reckons that this is where Easy Company was. So more or less where we're looking at the moment. And then F Company, Fox Company, is where our second trench is, and then what they call a drill field. So this is done from memory, and as you know, that can be quite a fickle thing. So let's go with the real archaeology as well to augment this, and you can see all the huts.
Right.
And this is really what we're after. So that is where that sketch shed Fox Company was, that's where Easy Company was, and you can see the huts. So that's our are a really good starting point. So this is the modern air photograph, and what we've done is we superimposed the plan of the Nissen huts on top of it, and that'll geolocate exactly where each of these huts was, and hopefully our excavation will pick those up. And I thought that'd be a useful tool for the team to be able to see where they're situated.
Nissen huts came in kit form and were designed to be put up by 6 men in 4 hours. We believe that some of the ones here were erected by the British Army, who were stationed here in the early war years before the US paratroopers arrived. The huts were secured with metal fixings set into concrete post pads, which we hope to locate using metal detectors.
We're looking at this row here, possibly going off at an angle, and where that flag is to your left, that could be the back pad.
John's hoping that we'll be able to identify some of the other features of the camp using magnetometry.
So John, what's the plan of action?
Well, this field's been surveyed. Well, most of it has, but we don't know what's happening to the south behind us. So we're extending the magnetics. You can see now we're collecting the data over there. We've got a whole range of possible targets, maybe a rubbish dump, more Nissen huts, and there were sort of tents here. I think they'd be a bit more difficult for us to actually map, but we're just going to see what we get.
Yeah. And when do you think we'll get some results?
We've only just started.
600 men were put in huts and barracks on a meadow that could well have supported at least 2 cows. The village soccer field became a combination gridiron ball diamond parade ground. Drunks fell in the cow pond, and VD movies were shown in the memorial hall.
Roger, I've got the aerial photograph here. We had Easy Company here, we had Fox Company here, but what I really want to know is how did they fit into this whole US military structure?
Okay, well I think I need to start right at the very top. They were part of the 101st Airborne Division. That division arrived in England in September of 1943, moved south by train through the industrial Midlands to southern England, to the Kennet Valley, which is where we are now. And divisional headquarters was at Greenham Lodge, just on the outskirts of Newbury. Regimental headquarters was established at Littlecote House, which is a Tudor manor house about 5 or 6 miles from where we are now. And then the regiment was made up of 3 battalions, 1st, 2nd and 3rd, and those battalions that were then split into companies.
The men from Easy, Fox and Dog companies were part of the 2nd Battalion of the 506th Regiment, commanded by Colonel Sink. They belonged to the famous 101st Airborne Division, known as the Screaming Eagles, commanded by General Maxwell Taylor. An impressive array of finds discovered over the last 2 years have pride of place in the Heritage Centre. Relics of their training include all kinds of ordnance, a parachute pull and even parachute silk. This cricket would have been used on landing in France to help identify friend from foe.
That is quite loud, isn't it?
It is definitely.
And there are personal effects, like a pair of nylons and an ATS badge, presumably left by visiting women after a night out. But one find that really stands out is an identification tag belonging to one of the men.
So last year, our star find was this dog tag, which says Carl F. Fenstermacher on it. And he's Easy Company, Carl is. Fantastic guy. He's done all of the most famous jumps. He wasn't just a paratrooper, he was also a pathfinder. And so they were the ones who went ahead of paratroopers, laid down signals, and then the paratroopers could land at those spots. On this dog tag, it says Carl F. Fenstermacher. He's not Carl F. Fenstermacher. When we did our research, he's actually Carl L. Fenstermacher. And he's got his number, he's got his blood type and things like that listed on this. But there's a bit of a misprint there as well. And this is, as you can see, folded in half.
So do you think he chucked it because it was incorrect?
Yes, yeah, he would have just discarded it. Otherwise, if you lost one of these, that's a big problem in the military. You could not do that. A massive offence to do it. He jumped at D-Day at Battle of the Bulge in Bastogne in Belgium, was one of 20 guys to jump and basically save everyone in Battle of the Bulge by getting those resupply in. Then went to Dachau. As a German speaker, they needed him, and so he was somebody who helped with getting all of the rest of the people out and kind of communicating what did happen in Dachau. All of this actually really affected him after the war, but he did end up at the very end in Eagle's Nest. So he's done it all. One of the best finds we could really ever find. Yeah, and here in Aldbourne, it's amazing.
Operation Nightingale has been using archaeology as part of a recovery programme for veterans for 12 years. And this year, the team has been joined by some ex-servicemen from 101st Division.
I think a lot of veterans are similar as I am, where I might not be the most social of people, but I like to be around people maybe doing similar things. And I think with the archaeology, you get down in the mud and you just kind of focus on what your task is. And veterans are very good at a task. You give us a task and we can do that.
Second nature to you.
Second nature as a soldier, so
Yeah.
right.
And you're standing in the footsteps of people who were doing a similar job to you 70, 80 years ago.
Right, exactly, yeah. I remember standing in the same field. They showed up in the middle of the night and saw the same hills, and it's all relatively still the same, so it's very, very kind of overwhelming.
Didn't realize there were two.
When you're in the forces, when you have your brothers and sisters to your left and to your right, whether in combat or not, there's a bond that is formed. I think that's we get that here as well. I think that, when you're in the rain, in the mud, working towards a common goal of, recovering this heritage and helping out on site, I think that bond is kind of reestablished.
What got you into it? How did you start?
Basically, I had a mental breakdown in the military, and I was stuck on the rear party when everybody deployed to Afghanistan. And one of the guys said, I've been tasked with getting a few guys together for an archaeological dig. Do you want to come along? It's Operation Nightingale. I said, I'd love the chance, yeah. If it helps me out. I was still serving when I did the first dig. The second dig, I was in the process of doing resettlement, of moving away from the military into commercial archaeology, where I started working for Wessex, and then I moved around, and now I work for West Yorkshire Archaeology, and now I'm nearing 200 digs.
The team have marked out a grid to metal detect a section of the field, and straight away they're in the money.
1916, George V.
Got that? Roof, the nails are used for the corrugated? Yeah. For them, so that's...
By the end of day one, we've got finds relating not only to the huts, but also life in the camp.
The guys have also found some ammunition, which is, I was joking earlier with Matt about it's not like doing prehistory because it's all date stamped. So when in prehistory or whatever other periods you're talking, 3,000 plus or minus 200 years or something, even with some good scientific dating. This one says 42 on it, so made in 1942, which is quite fun. So it's a nice tie down. It's a 50 cal round. That's really nice. So that's a heavy caliber piece of munition. It has been fired, so it's completely inert and safe. That's an American used piece of kit, which is great. And then the last thing, another thing, is a little plate. You find loads today. That's a plate, I think it might be from a harmonica. And we were talking earlier about the human story about the guys being here. They're here for pretty much 9 months. There's a lot of training, there's a lot of becoming military people, but there's a lot of boredom as well. And there's all sorts of things that the guys got up to here in their downtime. We'll find evidence for some of it, hopefully not all of it. But one of the things, passing time, maybe you can imagine them sitting around a campfire playing a mouth organ, something like that. Just appear whenever.
But it's not just the finds from the fields that can tell us how the paratroopers spent their time in England. Webster's memoirs are incredibly descriptive and were discovered totally by chance in an attic.
It was completely random, and we live in an old house in Aldbourne, and it was just searching through hundreds of years of old papers and paintings and photograph albums, and this manuscript just dropped out of the one of the boxes, and I had a little look at it, and it had this vivid description of life in Aldbourne and written by what it seemed to be a soldier. So I started researching it more, read through the document and discovered that it was David Kenyon Webster.
Webster appears to relish painting an extremely colourful picture of life in Aldbourne.
The non-jumping cooks astonished nearby civilians with their festivities. These not only included great sex orgies, but also drinking bouts, financed by the black market sale of the, or rather our, steak and butter. The shrieks, titters, foul-mouthed drunken oaths, creaking beds and coarse panting that echoed from their bedrooms and hayloft caused many a cackle among the village hens.
Mark Lawrence starred in the HBO series Band of Brothers and has brought an original copy of his script for John to display in the Heritage Centre.
There you go. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Star billing.
You don't want to trade it for one of the things you found last year, do you? I'll take a clicker.
Oh, yeah. I think Richard might have something to say about that.
Yeah, I know. Maybe I can finagle one in my pocket on the way out.
Acting in the series had clearly been much more than just a job to him.
The guy I played was a guy called William Jewton, and he was originally from Colorado. And he got killed on October the 5th, 1944 in Holland. So he never came back, but luckily I got to know his family since then, and I lived in Colorado, which was where he was originally from, and there's all these similarities. And during the war, my grandmother, she lived in Swindon, which is about 10 miles from here. So during the war, her and her mother, my great-grandmother, they used to drive buses up to Aldbourne to take the US soldiers into Swindon so they could get their drink on a Friday night. And so there's all these crazy similarities, you know, and it's it was the role of a lifetime, you know. It really was, and I'm sort of a local boy because I grew up in Swindon, so to know that this was on my doorstep, and I never really knew about it until I got this job. So you walk into an audition 20 years ago, and you're still talking about it today. So it's a very special thing. It is a very special thing. It's a very heartfelt thing.
Day 2 dawns, and Richard has Matt working in Trench 1, where he's exposing a line of post pads belonging to an Easy Company Nissen hut.
You'll see these orange spikes, Matt. These we think are potentially where there's a wall of one of the Nissen huts.
I think probably looking at maybe a bit less where you are as we're down the slope, but that's definitely it. So there's the beginnings of the surface coming up there.
It's a coin, but it's been snipped.
Someone's been. It's like the most relaxing way to spend a week.
Ivan, Penny and Kenny are test pitting in some of the gardens where we think the Red Cross hut might have stood and where the pump house was.
Oh look, what have we got here, Kenny? There's some kind of chain link there with an attachment.
Still no sign of post pads in Trench 1, but we've hit something entirely unexpected.
Just trying to get between the spokes is actually quite tricky.
And there's a story that Forrest Guth buried his bike here.
It's all rusted, so badly rusted. You see, that's a bit loose. That's very loose, so I've got to be really careful.
In Trench 2, we've revealed a line of brick foundations where the Fox Company hut stood. These are a totally different construction to the Easy Company huts on the other side of the field. And somewhere between the two were some pretty unpleasant sounding latrines, which had no running water, no lights, and no heating even in the depths of winter.
On such evenings, constipation was universally preferred to a brief interlude with the Arctic wind tunnel. The floor was usually a vile litter of caked mud, cigarette butts, and scraps of paper, and the north end was universally moist. Texans thought nothing of padding shoeless through our privy. But when I went there, I always wore shoes and tucked the laces inside.
While the men were freezing to death in their Nissen huts with rotten mattresses and terrible toilets, this is where the officers were staying. Little Cot House, magnificent Tudor mansion. I know where I'd rather be, don't you? During the 17th century, a Roman villa, complete with Orpheus mosaic, was discovered in the grounds at Littlecote. It was covered over until the 1970s, and according to Webster, it was believed to have been destroyed. In the woods surrounding the house, the men of Easy Company practiced manoeuvres, often over several days and nights, and they left their mark, quite literally, in the trees.
What's lovely about beech trees such as this is the bark is slow growing, and whilst any lettering or pictures might warp, you tend to be able to see what the writing is, even with some significant age. And I'd suggest this has got some age to it. You've got some slight warping going on. It's not as fresh as it would have been if it had been carved. And we've got the word, I don't know if you can make it out down here, but we've got Ohio written down, which would make sense. So if we've got American soldiers stationed nearby. Wow, now this is more like it.
Yeah, this is staggering, isn't it?
There's just so much going on.
I mean, this stands out like a sore thumb.
It does. That's got to be a Stars and Stripes.
Yeah, US flag, so we've got the US connection again, like with Ohio. It almost seems like there's multiple panels leading into each other, telling a bit of a story as well.
Yeah, there's stylised writing here, and two notable names from anyone that's seen the series or read the books, Buck and Butch. I mean, they are leading, prominent members of the division, and USA there, and just to confirm it.
The men who left these carvings were learning skills that might mean the difference between life and death. They were about to be scattered across northern France and needed to be able to read and use the landscape both to outmaneuver the enemy and to survive. And they needed to be able to identify friend from foe.
Right, crickets at the ready.
Right, Bruce and I are slowly advancing to where we think Derek is. It's hard not to make a lot of noise in the woods.
Much of the men's physical stamina was put down to the often cruel training regime of Captain Herbert Sobel. But on the exercises around Aldbourne, his tactical weakness was exposed. Colonel Sink was forced to make a decision that would change the fate of Easy Company when a long-running feud between Sobel and Lieutenant Dick Winters came to a head. Sobel had tricked Winters into failing to inspect the latrines. Winters refused to accept the minor punishment and demanded a court-martial. 8 of the company handed in their stripes in support of Winters, and Sink was faced with what was effectively a mutiny on his hands. It is a staggeringly nice room, isn't it?
Isn't it beautiful? What a view.
So Sink's sitting here, probably in this very seat. I think this is the one I'd have chosen to watch the men. And he's got this massive decision to make, hasn't he? Either he sides with the men, but if he does that, he's undermining the principle that you've got to obey your officers, yes. or he stays with his officer, and if he does, then the men are just going to walk out on him. And then you've got the added complication that you've got this Lieutenant Winters, who Sobel wanted to punish, and Winters is going, no, I will go for a court-martial.
He took his chances.
Which is going to be much more public.
Absolutely.
It's a nightmare. If I was Sink, I'd have walked straight out of that room.
It was an incredible command decision, and I think he must have thought really heavily about this. And to make that decision to somehow not remove Sobel, because he did acknowledge that it was Sobel created Easy Company at the end of the day.
So he said to Sobel, you're a good guy. You've trained these men up. This is all going to be brilliant.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very
Sobel's
much.
chest is all puffing up, thinking he's done a fabulous job.
And they said, oh, by the way, I'm going to get you out of here. I want you instead to do a very important job. I want you to train Vickers how to jump out of planes, basically.
That's exactly what he did. I mean, you know, Chiltern Foliot is a jump school a couple of miles up the road from here. I want it to feel like this is going to be a good thing for Sobel, that he's been given command of a complete jump school unit rather than just of a company. But it allowed him then to gently move Sobel out of the way and move Dick Winters up.
Chiltern Foliot wasn't far from Aldbourne, and new recruits and replacement underwent their training there.
The course lasted about 2 weeks. So they spent the first week learning how to pack parachutes, and how to jump out of mock fuselages. And I've actually got a picture here of a couple of fuselages. One of them's been made of sort of corrugated tin, and in the background you can see the rear of what was a B-17 fuselage.
And this is the door they're jumping out.
That's the door they're jumping over. This of course is quite a short jump, whereas that one is much higher.
Yeah.
As D-Day drew nearer, the skies were frequently filled with thousands of parachutes of different colours practising dropping personnel and supplies. And the villagers would race to collect the silk to make underwear.
Once they'd done their training, they needed to make 5 jumps from a C-47 to get their wings. And they would come from Chiltern Foliot, they'd be brought up here by truck, they'd get in a C-47, C-47 would take off, drop them in a field behind the house at Chiltern Foliot, they'd land, dash back to the parachute sheds, grab another parachute, jump on the truck, come back up here to Ramsbury, get in another C-47, and they tried, if they could, to get their 5 jumps in one day.
And as their training came to an end, Winston Churchill and General Eisenhower were treated to an impressive display of Airborne's potential. Back on site, and John and Adam have completed their surveys.
In this area, we're getting these really clear, very strong responses. Now those are either foundations of brick structures or maybe iron pads on the floor. They look quite modern. They're not sort of archaeological as such. So these could easily relate to something, you know, to do with the encampment. But when you look at your plan, there's nothing in that area. That's the limit of the Nissen huts, isn't it?
That's right.
In red.
Yeah.
And this is the area where these responses are showing. So that's the first point of interest. The second point is coming back into the field we're standing in now. That's the limit of the tents.
Yeah, there's a tent bases, concrete tent bases.
Well, there's the limit. We've clearly got similar strong responses this side of the goalpost, suggesting 2 or 3 structures there as well. Okay. So they're not marked on the plan, and that's not marked.
What do you make of that then, Richard?
Well, that's intriguing, isn't it? With the air photographs from where we've taken these huts in 1946, does that mean there are earlier structures pre-1946 that aren't on that photograph that correspond with your elements, or is it something later? I think we'll have to have a look at that.
As far as accommodation was concerned, you had the gloriousness of the Tudor mansion and the grimness of the Nissen huts. But halfway between were these. There were a lot of stables which had originally housed racehorses, which were round the back of the officers' mess. This one's been moved here now just to preserve it. And these were David Webster's favourite place on the whole site. You can understand why, can't you? It was a real haven compared with the madness of what was going on everywhere else.
I lived in many places in the Army, but none were quite as enjoyable as those box stalls in Aldbourne. Perhaps this was because I had a craving for privacy that they alone satisfied. Or perhaps it was Freudian, the love of a small, warm, dark place in which I could curl up and hide. I don't know. Whatever the subconscious reason, if any, there were many more tangible things to recommend the stables to soldiers. Where else, may I ask, could one share in the rich spoils of the officers' mess with a small, select company of 3 instead of a greedy barracks of 60?
The stables were dismantled piece by piece and moved from their original location, partly to Littlecote Manor and partly to the Currahee Military Museum in Toccoa.
Following on from the TV series, there was massive interest in the guys of Easy Company, and tours were set up to follow in their footsteps. They turned up here, found out that the stables were going to be demolished, so a hasty plan of action was formulated. My father, myself, our 2 friends, Sam and Tim, we carefully dismantled them. They were shipped up to Bryce Norton, flown over to Toccoa, and yeah, we followed on, the 4 of us. We carefully put it all back together again, and it now forms the major exhibit in the Currahee Military Museum in Toccoa, Georgia.
For the vast majority of the men of 2nd Battalion, the Nissen huts we're excavating were home, as they waited with mounting impatience to find out where and when they were going to be deployed.
The latrines were second only to the Red Cross hut as a social center where gossip was exchanged. Rumors sprang fully grown from the honey buckets. An F Company rifleman might come in with a copy of the Daily Mail, read it, use pages 1 and 2, and pass the remainder to his neighbor, a mortarman from Headquarters Company, along with a rumor that the outfit was going to Italy.
By the end of day 2, we're just beginning to see the Nissen huts emerging as we try to build up a picture of life in the camp for the American servicemen. 6 days left to see what else the band of brothers left behind for us to find.
If you want us to investigate more sites, you can make it happen. So, help us reach 10,000 members on Patreon.
Day 3 is underway, and there are now tangible signs of Easy Company's Nissen hut in Trench 1, as well as what now appears to be a motorbike wheel. Now, it may look to you as though we've kept this whole field really nice and respectable, lovely wide-eyed school children looking at it, but over here it's just like a dodgy music festival, isn't it? You've got all these tents and vans. That's the tent belonging to our cameraman Steve. Hello, mate. There's the shower tent. This one belongs to Kerry. And over here, this is the office, hi Karen, and sort of kitchen thing there, but this is the big deal. Matt actually owns this. He must be making a fortune, mustn't he? It's also where we do the sound recording. Hi Matt, you in here?
Tony!
Lovely motor.
Thank you, you made it, how are you?
All right.
Richard.
Hello Matt. Hello.
Morning. Trench 1 is looking great. What's the plan for today then?
Well, I suppose the bottom line is to find our hut, but
Yeah.
where Pat's working here, he's got can you see the tar paper? There's the waterproofing layer at the bottom of the huts that we're looking for, the Nissen hut, and it's also with the motorbike wheel. The idea is really to clean this up, get it photographed, and then join them together if we can, and make sure that the tar paper continues along, and then we've really got the outline of our hut in this trench.
Right, and you've had some great finds out of here, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. We've had really quite exciting things that link us to exactly what we're looking for, really. So we start off with this sort of prosaic thing. It's an ointment tube, but remember these guys aren't fighting all the time or training all the time. They have the kind of medical conditions that everyone would have. You put 16 people in a hut, there's a chance of this sort of thing spreading. So one of those, and then we're getting into the soldiers themselves, which is obviously what we want to be finding. And you remember on the first day I was talking about little horseshoes at the bottom of boots that people do bring them in as mule shoes or something, but they're military issue boots, and that's the heel plate of a military boot. So one of those. There probably will be more of these actually. I'd expect to find more. So that's great, but what we really want is to find the Americans.
Right.
And I think this is probably our first really good
glimpse of the Americans. Got a leather strap and a buckle.
Oh yeah, look at that, and there's writing on there.
There is writing. What does it say?
Down the bottom there, it's Prov RO, is it?
RI?
RI, and at the top, RAUF.co.
Yeah, so that's the company name, and Prov RI, Providence, Rhode Island.
Ah, so that's definitely American then.
100% American. This is our first definite trace of Americans, and I had two of these on each boot. So there's all sorts of bits and pieces. Actually, there's another thing that Pat's just found. It came from your hold, didn't it, Pat? Do you know what that is?
It did, Richard. So this is the equivalent to the modern day cleaning rod. Attach a string on one end, and you put your patch to run through the barrel. You pull it through, and it cleans out the barrel, and I believe it's from the M1 Garand.
Oh, it's an American cleaning kit for the rifle.
Brilliant.
So that connects us to our paratroopers really well. Nice find.
This find gives us a nice link to Forrest Guth, pictured outside this very hut. Guth became the armourer for his comrades and could adapt an M1 rifle to become fully automatic. He adapted his uniform to carry all the equipment he needed by sewing on extra pockets. On the other side of the field, the teams revealed more of the Nissen hut that Fox Company occupied.
Here we've got, as you can see, we've got brick foundations coming out. We're actually at the back of the hut, and that's you can see here, there's one of the back entrance here. And we're running along the wall here, and running along the wall here.
And have you got any evidence for the floor in here yet?
At the moment, no. We've come down onto sort of like this gravelly clinker. We think it's like a sub-base at the moment, which is in here. And at the moment, we're digging down onto that as the first stage.
So why is this base made of brick and the other one concrete?
So the only reason we can think about at the moment about why there is the difference is that it was done in 2 phases of construction. Potentially this was done in one, and then the second phase over on the other side. It could be that this was done first of all, and that the reason that there isn't the same build is 2 things. 1, lack of material, and 2, time.
And as if by magic, the first signs of a floor surface appear.
Oh yeah, I found a bit of concrete as well, of the flooring. So that's quite interesting.
In Trench 1, it's time to lift the wheel carefully to try to identify it.
Wow, look at that. Well, this is why I love archaeology. Come to Aldbourne, looking for the Nissen huts. We've got the concrete floors, we've got the geophysics, we've got the aerial photographs, day 3, and we found a motorbike wheel.
The wheel looks very like the ones you find on M1 machine gun carts. And to add to this, a sign was donated to the Heritage Centre made from a box that stored, you've guessed it, M1 machine gun carts. And underneath the wheel is something that takes me back to the dodgy sandwiches from my childhood.
Shippums. Shippums, which could well be for fish or meat paste.
Sounds like it, doesn't it?
So what we got for dinner then?
Well, what I thought I'd introduce you to is the K-ration, which is what the American soldiers during the Second World War would have got either in the field or on exercise.
It may be used as a waterproof container for matches, cigarettes and other items. Wouldn't say that nowadays, would it?
No, it wouldn't.
For security, hide the empty can and wrappers so they can't be seen.
Well, that would be if you go and leave your rubbish all over the place, the enemy's going to know where you've been and where you are.
Yeah, it does make sense, doesn't it? Right, let's have a look and see what's inside. Yummy, yum, yum. What's that?
Box of tissues.
Oh, no. Kerry's filled the box with modern equivalents of the K-rations the men would have had to survive on. Oh, a couple of nice fags. Oh, I haven't had a fag for a while.
Well, every ration pack has a packet of cigarettes in it.
This is what? This is sugar, is it?
Sugar, yep.
Yep. And this one is instant coffee. Very nice, yep. Oh, what are these?
Okay, I'll open them for you. There you go.
Lovely. Dent chewing gum?
Chewing gum, yep, because you wouldn't have a toothbrush necessarily, so you can clean your teeth with a bit of gum.
A little bit of cheese. Very nice. A bit more cheese. And that's my main course, I suppose.
That is, yep, that's hot or cold, but that's a ham and egg or spam in there.
Oh, I like a bit of spam. But I think tonight I'll just go for the cheese option. Oh. Lovely. How many calories do you reckon there are in this little lot?
There's about 2,800 calories in all 3 meals for the day.
So you get 3 of these?
You get 3 of these, one for breakfast, one for dinner and one for supper. The trouble is the calories were worked out for an average working man. They're not worked out for a man who's going to be jumping out of an aircraft, running around the countryside being shot at. So there weren't enough calories. Whereas today's modern soldier, their ration packs have about 4,200 calories in there. So at least you can stay fit. Whereas with these, you're going to lose weight and lose energy.
Although I have to say that none of the things that are here match what I would like best, which I know they used to have.
What's that?
Lardy cake.
We did have some, it's all gone.
Oh. I have to stick to the cheese well. Food, drink and how to get it clearly occupied the minds of the men here. Webster describes KP in the officers' mess at Hightown as a pleasure and a privilege, as well as a source of loot for many a squad feast.
Most of all, we liked the easy access to fresh butter, fruit cocktail, and sliced pineapples stored in the cool stone cellar below the kitchen. There was a fist-sized hole in the cellar's window screen, and when none of the cooks were watching, we could slip a can or two through it into the long grass outside, where it remained hidden until quitting time.
Back in Trench 1, and you never know quite what you're going to find when you're looking for a Nissen hut.
Matt, Richard. What have you got there?
What do you think of that? It seems to have most of the indicative bits, doesn't it?
It does look like it's been struck, which would make this a lot earlier than our band of brothers.
I don't think they're using flintlocks or anything, are they? So it's got all the bits we need. But well, we'll have a look at that later. But I think it's a bit of prehistory to go with the Second World War. But I think we've got the edges of the hut here.
Yes, let's roll forward a few thousand years. What have you got in this trench here?
Well, it's coming. You've got this sort of yellow layer here, and then there's a very, very dark band which has got bits of iron. You see that there?
Yeah.
There's little bits of what I think is going to be tar paper, that black flecking there. And then on this side, we're back to the yellow.
Right, okay, so what is this dark line then?
Well, it's a good question. This is where we're expecting to see the Nissen hut edges, but I'm wondering whether there's some sort of drainage gully at the edges of it. It sort of makes sense, you know, water running down this semicircle of corrugated iron. It's going to be quite swampy at the edge. So is there some sort of drainage system? Well, I think the idea for me now is to clean it up to get the line coming back, and then once we've got the extent of the hut exposed, then maybe we can put a slot across it and see if we have got a drainage gully associated with the hut.
I'll grab a mat.
Excellent, thank you, Matt.
And give it to you.
There's one here.
It's believed that the huts were originally built by British soldiers stationed here before the US paratroopers arrived.
You found something, Mark?
Yeah, just like that, Richard. Not entirely sure. The crown
is there a training corps?
Air Training Corps.
So I've no idea when they were founded, but it's quite nice. It's a young person's organisation.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
You've got regular British military here, regular American, and maybe quite an early young person's military presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Brilliant.
That's a good find.
Nice
Well, it's
find.
our first military badge. Let's find some more.
Cheers.
Nice one. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Richard. Well done, mate. Well done.
The British had been at war for 5 years when the Americans arrived, and they found a country that not only bore the scars, but was also very different culturally. And to avoid unnecessary friction, the authorities came up with a cunning plan. This is instructions for American servicemen in Britain in 1942. If Britons sit in trains or buses without striking up a conversation with you, it doesn't mean they're being haughty and unfriendly. Probably they're paying you more attention than you think, but they don't speak to you because they don't want to appear intrusive or rude. Another difference. The British have phrases and colloquialisms of their own that may sound funny to you. Ominous, isn't it, with this thunder going? So, ominous things. It isn't a good idea to say bloody in mixed company in Britain. It's one of their very worst swear words. To say I look like a bum is offensive to their ears, because for the British this means that you look like your own backside. That's a good tip, isn't it?
The British don't know how to make a good cup of coffee. That's very true. And you don't know how to make a good cup of tea. It's an even swap.
Fair
Very
enough.
true. Yes, fair enough. Yes, we'll meet in the middle on that one.
Well, exactly, yeah. I think that kind of summarises the British-American relationship there, doesn't it, in the war. Do you think this would have been any use to you when you came over for the first time you came to Britain?
Yes, it's a must-read.
Yeah, we'll have the whole list.
You see the postpad? You see the postpad?
Let's see.
By the afternoon of day 3, we've finally got the first signs of the post pads.
We were debating it. They've got the similar story there with the line coming along, but just there, David, you've got the postpad.
Ah, amazing.
So that's the first one. We wanted to find a few more, but that's good. Is there any spike in it or anything like that?
We haven't found a spike yet. No. They're all quite loose, probably damaged when it was knocked down. So.
Well, that's good. At least we got one.
Great news. It's the first structural evidence in the ground of the Nissen hut which Forrest Guth was pictured in front of 80 years ago. We haven't found any post pads on the other side, but Richard has borrowed Matt's tent pegs to mark out where he's expecting them to run.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, you can go straight that way. We'll carry on that way.
Brilliant. Let's do that then. Right, I'll put the peg in here. On the edges of. And typically it's not going in, is it? I'm bending you. I'm ruining your pegs. Can you want to hit it with a mattock? And see if we know, and I'll put the peg in after that. Just
a bit of the
clear
stuff
it
off.
and hit it with a mattock.
Oh. Ah. Hello. Have you got the trowel?
That will be why it's not going anywhere. Have a fertile.
Oh well, this looks suspiciously concrete.
Oh look, is that a reinforcement?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh right. Well,
what are the chances of that?
So that would be why it's not. But it's not on our line, is it?
No.
So that is. It looks to me at the moment that's in situ. That's a nicely laid thing. So maybe that does work quite well with your idea of it being a drainage gully.
I see. So the corrugated sheet came down to here,
yeah,
and this was to support on the inside.
Yeah, I think that's probably what we got.
Right. That's quite
really
high
good.
up, isn't it? So we guess we need to kind of get round that.
Yeah, we'll have to. Yes, and I'll find a new place to put them.
I'll have those back actually, Richard, before you bend them all. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh dear.
At last, we've got post pads on both sides of the hut, and those all-important finds are coming up all over the place.
Trying to find this one. Just put in there. Yeah.
Place those two together. What you have is a 3008 rifle cartridge.
Right, these I recognise. These are the roof nails or roof screws, aren't they, that held the corrugated iron down. What else is there?
You got this. These are called dogs. They're used for joining timbers together.
So that's off a Nissen hut as well.
Yep, definitely. Drain, which we're looking at, and these.
Spam key.
Spam key. Well done.
Day 4 starts with Hild looking for one of the structures John identified on the geophys, which wasn't visible on the aerial photographs. And in the test pit, where we think the Red Cross hut stood, Ivan has spotted something of interest.
What you got?
It looks very much like a beer bottle.
Let's have a look. Oh wow, well, wasn't this the recreation hut as well as the first aid place?
Beer and recreation?
Well, would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Be careful with it.
looking less like a beer bottle. Here we go. There's liquid in it as well. And the stopper's on the top. So could it be some kind of medicine instead of liniment or something?
Possible, isn't it?
But the stopper's still in as well.
And I think it's probably best if we leave it that way. Give Richard a shout.
A complete bottle though that's been in the ground for 70, nearly 80 years.
So this bottle may have held some medicine used to treat the soldiers in the Red Cross hut. While the team continues, Matt has been retracing the steps of perhaps the most famous member of Easy Company, Captain Dick Winters.
So John, we're sitting on this bench here overlooking the churchyard in Aldbourne, and it's a very special bench.
It is a special bench. It's a special bench to the memory of Dick Winters, Lieutenant Winters. It was his favourite place in the village. He would often come here whenever he wanted quiet. On the first morning when he came up the path here from past the church, he came across a couple who were tending a obviously new grave. The grave was that of their son Leonard, who was an aircraftsman in the RAF, and he had been killed in a raid. They had buried him a few months before, and they came every morning to tend his grave and to sit here and remember him. They got talking and talking more deeply, and basically within an hour or so, that morning struck up a very deep friendship. But Winters fitted in just perfectly. He became a member of the family. He became a real member of the family, almost to the extent of being a surrogate for Leonard.
There were other close relationships forged with the villagers. Lieutenant Ronald Spears married Margaret Griffiths. And pictured in one of the wedding photos is Lieutenant Buck Compton, whose name we found carved into a tree. Two brothers who lived here in 1943 have affectionate memories of the soldiers and the camp.
Colin,
yes.
David, you were young boys, about 7,
Yes.
when Easy Company came to this field. Tell us what it was like when they arrived.
I remember all their manoeuvres and everything going on. I used to stand down the end of the drive just up the road in our house and watch them march up and down Southern Lane, go off to their manoeuvres up in the woods and things. And they'd come marching by and chuck sticks of chewing gum to me. And yes, it was for a young lad of 6 and 7, it was marvellous to see all this lot going on.
It sounds like a really, really busy time. The village must have really changed. But then, of course, suddenly they all disappeared.
And my cousin of mine, Peter, who was the same age as me, used to come and stay. And we loved scouring all around, finding all these things that had been discarded. And on the day that they all left for D-Day, we heard lots of goings on in the night, and we walked down in the morning, walked down the road here, came into the camp, and everything was just left open. It just said people just walked straight out. Everything was just left there, and there was live ammunition left on one of the tables, and the hut was just up there.
Do you think you actually went into any of these huts then that we've been
Yes,
covering today?
yeah, definitely, yeah.
So tell us a bit about Switzy here, this little monkey.
Yes, well, as I said, he was given to me in '36 as a Jubilee present, and he was a proper chimpanzee. He didn't have clothes or anything. It was probably all with lots of hair and everything. But later on, he got these clothes, and whether that came at the same time or that was sewn on after he had the jersey, but so Easy Company gave Mother that and the Airborne badge there, sewn on, and they've been there ever since.
Hild's test pit has somewhat disappointingly only produced a few tent pegs and nothing structural beyond the tent bases visible on the aerial photos. But despite multiple rain interruptions, we've managed to get a clear idea of the structure of Easy's Nissen hut.
Well, we've had a bit of rain this afternoon,
Yeah,
so
And by the look of it, you've got the tar paper, but that should be a waterproofing layer. But the key thing is getting the building on the inside, and by the looks of it, you're getting that too.
Yep, we've definitely got the pads going towards the back, but unfortunately towards the front, they've been machined out while they've been levelling the playing field. So we've just got the faint sort of like trace of where they were.
So bits of the building are missing, but are you getting any finds related to the building?
100% we are, yeah. And obviously if you've got a listen hut, you need a door, so we've got a bit of door hinge.
Now, you've got to find a door, that'd be really nice. You've got two options. The front door, but that's been bulldozed away, as you say. Chancellor at the back?
Well, you never know. We'll be excavating through there, so you never know. We might find some evidence of it.
Brilliant.
And then the roof sheets.
Brilliant.
Nails.
So that's a nail with a curved sort of washer at the top because it's corrugated iron, and that corresponds to the curve. And that's that. You found any more of those, or was it just that one?
Loads of them. Obviously, when they knocked it down, they just ripped them out, threw them on the ground, and they went into this ditch.
Great. So we can follow that wall, get the rest of the pads. Same on the other side. So we've got the full dimensions, and then maybe the back.
Yep. Hopefully the back. And the one thing we're not sure, what should we do with the centre?
The geophysical survey had a really strong reading in the middle, and when the veterans talk about these huts, there were 16 people in these, 8 bunk beds, and the way they kept warm was a pot-bellied stove. Now, wouldn't that be nice? You've got a pot-bellied stove in the middle of that. Big metal reading.
Yeah.
And some of the finds connect us directly to the smart young soldiers who made Aldbourne their home.
Well, we've also continued the metal detecting grid across the sports pitches, and the last grid of the day turned up a lot of elements of Americana, and I think the key thing was this rather lovely button.
Wow, that is beautiful.
You can see the American Eagle on it. It's a dress button. It's got the writing of the manufacturers on the back, and that symbol appears behind pretty much every presidential speech today. And as such, I think that's a really lovely find. It shows our American soldiers in this field. It'll clean up well, and it'll be a lovely find for the local museum.
Yeah, that's an absolute star find and some great results today. I think we've earned a drink in the pub.
I think we totally have, and I think we should do that right now.
Let's go.
The pubs in Aldbourne proved popular destinations for the men. The officers tried to reserve the Blue Boar for themselves, but according to Webster, neither the men nor the landlord were happy with this arrangement.
It caused us to regard the imposition as a challenge and try to sneak in wherever we could, via the back door when the premises was occupied, or the front door when the coast was clear. Mr. Dady always welcomed us heartily. I believe he had been an enlisted man in the other war, and always managed to save us a beer or a milk stout.
Cheers! Cheers!
The half basement at the Crown Pub was taken over as the company command post, officially the liveliest spot in town. But the day of the coronation of King Charles III, it's a little bit draggled.
This room here was where Dick Winter stayed when he was billeted with the Barnes family along with his friend Harry Wells. Now, while they were here, all the soldiers loved the lardy cake which they made in the village, but the best lardy cake came from here. And I'm going to pop inside, grab some, take it back to site.
The lardy cake went some way to offset the chilly dampness of the English winter.
Lardy cake is a heavy, sticky coffee ring-like pastry that is very filling and far more appetizing than its name would imply. I'd hide it under my field jacket and smuggle it into camp for future reference.
With the lardy cake safely stowed for later, Matt finds work continuing unabated.
Now, I thought that rain would stop play, but I've clearly underestimated your team.
No, these are hardy military folk, Matt. These are revelling in it. This is good training weather, this is, and yeah, they're really keen to keep on, and I think that's a good reflection of how actually exciting this trench is.
So what can you do when it's raining like this?
I think you've got to keep movements to a minimum because you can make a real mess, and also it's slippy, so it could be a bit dangerous. I think what we're trying to do is just expose to the level of the post pads, get the sections cleaned, and then hopefully when it stops raining, we'll be able to trowel it back and get that nice, flat, clean layer.
Right, so it's all systems go in this trench,
It really is, yeah, it really is. I want to resolve this as soon as possible, and then we can start finding things inside the hut.
Okay, well, I would offer to help, but I think they need some help in the finds tent, so I really better make my way over
very
there.
Webster of you. Well done. Thank you.
That's iron.
Yeah, it's iron.
Being by no means an expert, part of the structure of the building, I suspect. But we'll give it a good clean and we'll find out. But yeah, nice. Very good find.
I'm U.S. Army. We have people here who's from the Navy and the Air Force. Being that this is Easy Company, I mean, me being a history fan, me and Mike, the other one who organized all of this, we just volunteered. We wanted to be out. We wanted to show face. And we can't just step past, you know, band of brothers kind of things. And I was telling people the other day, I went to the cemetery right next to Cambridge, and I actually found a really distant cousin of mine, unfortunately on the Wall of the Lost, not in the graveyard itself, but it was very nice to be able to commemorate, especially a member of our family over here.
Despite the mud and all the rest of it, I've just dragged out literally 5 minutes ago what looks like a spanner, and it probably is a spanner, and maybe it was one of the spanners that was used to build the huts that we're now stood on. So that's a nice little story, and when we clean it up, maybe we'll even find a maker's name on there.
Last week I was in Normandy for a battle staff ride, so I got to see all that side of D-Day, and I got to go to all the battlefields and the bunkers and where all the beaches were, so that was kind of cool. So I'm getting a big loop of everything that has to do with the 101.
So what do you think you've gained from your work here over the last few days?
A whole lot of knowledge. I think that's the biggest thing that I've found is a methodology, getting to work with Richard Osgood, the team, time team. It's been great. I've learned basically how to handle yourself out here, what to do, what not to do, how to mark things down, how to document everything. It's been a tremendous learning experience. I can't wait to do it again. So I walked down the street the other day and I was talking to someone about the project, and they actually got to meet Dick Winters and twice in the early 2000s. And so we talked about that for a good half hour.
You're right, Pat. What have you got there?
Just dug out old pocket knife.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, definitely a pocket knife. And you see the blades in there and the little hoop.
Tied off too.
Yeah, it looks like it might be a bone handle as well. That's an absolutely brilliant find.
Yeah, maybe there'll be an inscription or something on there somewhere.
Possibly, yeah. We'll get that cleaned up and we'll have a good look at it.
Some of the finds that we're getting are surprising the experts.
I don't think we expected to find as much ammunition as we have. This example here is a standard American .3006 round, so it was used in the rifles and machine guns. As you can see, it's unfired, but in fact it's completely empty because it's just completely broken up. That would have been fitted into something like this. This is an 8-round Garand clip for an M1 Garand rifle, which was the standard rifle that the 506 parachute infantry guys would have used. So we've also found some of the clips as well. We found a number of these, and as you can see, that's actually in surprisingly good condition, but very easy to see the two together there. So they were obviously firing live ammunition, practicing with live ammunition. And we've also found quite a few of these blanks. So blank ammunition is used to simulate gunfire. So when you fire it, it makes a loud report, but there's no bullet. So you can use it for fire and manoeuvre, and there's no risk in terms of shooting your fellow soldiers.
So that's what they would have used if they were training around the village and outside in the landscape?
That's right. And traditionally, that's what you start training with before you go on to live ammunition. Somewhat surprisingly, we found some bigger ammunition, so heavy machine gun ammunition, .50 Browning, which is a bit of an enigma at the moment because they didn't use the .50 Browning because it's a massive machine gun and it wasn't possible to airdrop it. And some of the more unusual stuff that we really didn't expect to find is items such as this. So as you can see, this is very badly degraded, but it's actually a German rifle round.
Right. Why on earth would a German rifle round be in this camp?
Well, they were introduced to enemy weapons. So they had weapons familiarisation training. So when they landed in Europe, they were able to use weapons should they need to.
Right, okay, so that's come from the German side. It's been captured or found and taken back here for training purposes.
That's right, yeah. And another interesting item related to this, so this piece of curled up rust here, it's actually a part of a German machine gun belt link, which you could link together, and they were firing through German machine guns.
After a soggy start to the day, the moment Matt's been waiting for. Lardy cake.
Yes, I have.
That is really good. It's kind of crunchy on the outside, super soft on the inside, raisins, and a good smear of lard on the bottom there. So I think really gives it, you know, really pushes it over the line in the world of cakes. I highly recommend the local lardy cake. Delicious.
And it seems to be going down pretty well with the team.
Okay, I can see the hype. That one.
Yeah.
All right, I get it.
Work stops only briefly to watch the coronation of King Charles III.
Wait, does she have her crown yet or no?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
To actually be here, I mean, that is something phenomenal, and to see all of the ceremony that's involved, that's something special because we don't have anything quite as ancient in our culture over in the United States.
Popular myth holds that the cockerel on the church was replaced because the old one was used as target practice in 1944.
Mark, this is the weather vane that was on top of the church tower in Aldbourne in the 1940s, and there's a bit of a mystery behind it, isn't there? There's what appears to be a bullet hole.
Well, I think it's perfectly plausible. If we take this standard rifle round, if we look at it as a strike from the front, it's slightly larger. But if we take it as a potential strike from a slight angle, I think it's perfectly plausible.
If you have a look at the back, spin it around a bit. There you go, grab that out.
Yeah, and if we were looking at a penetrating bullet strike, we can see here that, in fact, it looks very much like it, because if this is the rear, you can see where the paint has flaked off, which is typical of what we'd expect on the reverse of something's been hit from the front, and that's the back.
So this could have been hit by someone from Airborne 101 as they practiced for D-Day?
I think they certainly could, or somebody making a bet.
Yeah, or some just having a bit of fun.
Having a bit of fun, and it was a good shot, they hit it.
It's Coronation Day, 5th of May 2023, and what an amazing day we've had. We're out on the green in Aldbourne. There must be 200, 300 people out here. The beacon is going behind me, pretty much. The flames are going, it's certainly smoking. There's some live music starting. What a perfect end to a fantastic day.
So together we brought Time Team back, and now we're going to take Time Team to the next level. Help us achieve 10,000 ongoing members on Patreon.
Your ongoing membership enables us to develop more sites and more episodes. Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
Day 6 is underway, and thankfully the rain has stopped and work can continue as the team enter the final 2 days of the dig.
Dave, it's 11:06 a.m. and I've just heard you've already bagged Find of the Day. What have you got?
Well, this has been the find of my trip so far, actually. It's a knife. It was right here. And it says USA on the handle, and I'm pretty sure that's Bakelite, so it would be from the period.
You're right, yeah, so that's certainly, well, almost certainly from the army.
I would say so. Of course, we're going to take it back to the tent and have them do some research on it, clean it up a bit, and see if they can make a match.
Yeah, so what do you think it might have been used for?
Could have been used in the mess hall, could have been used as a utility knife of some sort. Don't really know, but we'll find out.
That's amazing, that is the star find.
Quite happy with it.
Today, Carenza has joined the team to help out in the test pits.
Hi, Cassie. Hi. How is it going?
It's going well. We've found this metal detecting because there's a big metal something under there.
Okay, so where are we? Can you orientate me?
Yeah. Okay, so we're about here. The huts here run along behind us.
Okay.
And those run along that side. Yeah. So we're just on this, path, we think around about there.
Yeah, it's not a great path, is it, really? I mean, considering how well made the base is. I mean, looking at it, it doesn't look quite such a formal path.
We know they brought in rubble to beef up the paths. Maybe it's settled as well. You know, this field has had a lot of people driving over it.
Stuart has also joined the team to scour the landscape for evidence of where Easy Company conducted their training. Local landowner Ben Lawton wants to show him some more tree carvings he's found in the woods.
Ah, right. So we've got CLSC USA.
Oh, well, I know what USA is likely to be. What about those?
Well, it'd be brilliant if that was Carwood Lipton from South Carolina in the USA.
Wouldn't that be nice if we could personalise that carving to this point in time to somebody in Easy Company?
It would be brilliant, wouldn't it?
Carwood Lipton was the jump master of one of the C-47 Sky trains that flew the paratroopers into Normandy. He was also one of the sergeants who turned in his stripes in support of Winters in the showdown with Sobel. As well as tree carvings, Ben thinks he's spotted the remains of foxholes in the woods.
To the untrained eye, this might not look very much, but this rectangular depression in the ground here is a classic two-man foxhole. Originally, dig down into it with a trenching tool, depth I should say of about 5 foot, maybe 6 foot, and two men could stand in here and almost be invisible in the landscape. You can see how the ground rises up behind me. This is a material that's come out of here, but it's not just dumped. It's actually part of the architecture of this practice work. It's basically a defensive parapet, and that tells me that this was designed to face that way. And if you look through the hedge line there, you can imagine attacking troops coming over there. They wouldn't see you. You're down here in the ground behind this parapet, but you've got a lovely skyline. You could down here. It's like target practice, silhouetted against the crest over there.
Easy Company dug into foxholes through freezing winter days and nights in Bois-Jacques before they reoccupied the village of Foy. But during this short period, they suffered many losses, and among the dead was Private Penkala, played by actor Tim Matthews in the HBO series.
He was a mortarman, so he's part of a three-man mortar squad with Skip Muck and Donald Malarkey, and made it as far as Bastogne in the Battle of Foy, and unfortunately it took some very heavy casualties. There was some extremely heavy shelling of the forest that they were in, and he took a direct hit to his foxhole, and he and Skip Muck died at the same time together.
But it sounds quite intense though. I mean, all of you were together for several months filming. How was the whole experience of that?
The training and the acting were very different, I'd say. The acting, I think for all of us, was heavily influenced by the training, and the training involved going to boot camp for something like 10 or 11 days, depends who you ask. And that was very intense and very hard, actually. It was physically very hard, mentally very hard. It was only a very short period of time, and our lives didn't depend on it. But, you know, at moments it felt like the stakes were quite high, so they really put us through it.
We're a mile and a half south of Aldbourne, Pentacool Wood. Why here?
Right. Well, this is part of the training landscape of the 506th in Aldbourne. We know from the war diaries that they were training here. And this is where we're standing out here in front, or where there was a farmhouse.
On the LiDAR, that would be that
exactly.
Group of structures there. You see them in the earthworks, can't we? There, yeah. Okay, got that.
Exactly. So what we've got is the documentary evidence saying that they used this as a live firing range. They basically blew up the farmhouse.
So you should be expected to find some evidence of those activities. How are you going to do that?
What we're going to do is a metal detecting survey.
Well, if you're going to stay here and do that, I'm going off on a bit of a wander because I saw some interesting things on the LiDAR in the woods I want to take a look at.
Stuart thinks he can see a line of foxholes running along the edge of the woods.
This is really, really interesting. This is a really well preserved example of a foxhole. Although the pit behind where the trench would have been dug is now infilled with leaves and rotting vegetation, the bank, the protective bank that they throw up around it, is extremely well preserved. About 40 metres further down from the foxhole I've just found is another foxhole set in exactly the same position on the inside of the ditch line. That is quite a sizable parapet there, so you get some idea that this pit was probably about 4 or 5 feet deep at least. And again, the preservation is very good. The important thing is these are the first 2 of the features I saw on the LiDAR, and they both are genuine World War II slit trenches.
The metal detectorists are finding evidence of the military exercises below and above ground.
It's a lovely M1 carbine round.
I think we might have found a bit of a grenade.
Yes, indeed. This is a detonator group or a fuse from an American fragmentation grenade.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, and we can tell that because of its shape and form. They're very, very particular in how they're set up.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Easy to ID, nice find.
Yeah, thank you.
So detected on the training ground today, we've been looking to see if we've got evidence of what we knew the paratroopers were taken in with them. They had these, which are the pineapple type of hand grenades.
With just 2 days left, the team are feeling pretty happy with the way the dig's progressing. And in the evening, they gather round the campfire to discuss tactics for the final push.
Aldbourne, day 7, and things are quite subdued here on the campsite. I was up pretty early this morning, but judging by the remnants of this fire pit, I think there were a few late nights. But that's fine. This dig isn't just about shifting soil and finding artefacts. It's about making friends. It's about the camaraderie, and it's about enjoying yourself. Well, the rain is just about starting to set in now, but our valiant team have got their tools, and I can see them moving over towards the trenches, so I should probably get going too.
Cass is finishing up in her test pit on the path between the rows of huts.
And you've got that big metal drum out because it isn't there anymore. Oh right, wow. Yes. Fantastic. So it's a shame there's no label on it, is that we can actually see what it might have had in it.
It's possible this might have been one of the braziers that provided a little warmth to the camp.
Hopefully. And then
what was
mystery.
this?
Yeah, that's everyone's question. Iron set into mortar with a rather curious shape cast into it. We had 2 last year, and we still don't know what they are.
One theory is that these strange objects might be rifle butt mounts.
Richard, I believe this is part of a beer bottle. Probably a bit too old to have come from last night's festivities. But what can you tell us about it?
I think we were having cans, so I think we're in the clear on this one. The bottle itself is nothing significant really to it, but the stopper actually is got some really nice historical information on it. And you can see it's got writing on it. It says
war grade.
War grade, yeah. So by the time that this bottle's put together with the beer in it, rubber is a really strategic resource. It's an important material. They're using it for things that help the war effort. So things like aeroplane tyres, really important. That's where you're directing all your resources. And the Japanese have captured lots of the rubber plantations by this point in the war, and so it's quite a scarce material. So they've made it very clear that this may not be the highest quality of bottle stopper, but there's a reason behind it. And the other element with this is there is an American link, because that resource, being so precious, really did encourage the Americans to come up with a synthetic alternative to rubber, because it's a material that all the war efforts across the globe will need.
Right, so we want it's a metre this way, but we also want to get 1.41 across the diagonal, because that'll make it square.
Karenz is putting a test pit into one of the back gardens to look for some of the huts that are visible on the aerial photos. And we've got a curious find near the door of the Nissen hut in Trench 1.
Right, what have we got here then? Something coming up?
Yeah, we've got a glass bottle. Yeah, we've got a lovely glass bottle just underneath there, but just put a brush on top just to stop any stones hitting it on the way down. Looks a bit like an old school Orangina one.
I was just thinking, yeah.
Or a Pepsi
Sprite
one.
or something.
Yeah,
well,
Just take your glove.
Right.
Go on, I'll let you do the honours, Jack.
Thanks, mate.
Take up for Bulacor. See if it moves first before you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we taking it?
Yeah. Oh.
Hey.
Beautiful. How's that top? Does it have some cracks
Top
in it?
looks amazing.
No, that's...
Oh no, it's...
That's just roots.
Roots.
So it's
have gone-
fully...
Is it corked? What's in the top?
No, it's mud.
There's mud. Is there writing on it?
Yeah, there is. CBC 12R, it looks like.
The bottle isn't the only find that's come out of the back of Easy Company's Nissen hut.
You can see this bit of wood, and that was actually more like this coming out. We haven't found this before, but we think it's part of maybe the window or the door frame, something like that. We also found this. And this side is quite green, but that's just because it was laying on the ground. But that could have been part of a door frame or something like that, some type of door fitting. And then just recently, a little bit further along, we found this here.
Oh wow. Is that marmalade?
It is. It's a marmalade top.
It's sad, really, isn't it, that all those wonderful old buildings that were part of the history down there have been demolished long ago. Well, it would be if that was true, but it isn't quite, because that is the original Red Cross building. Come and have a look. Steve?
Hello, Tony.
An awful lot of this is obviously fairly new, but some of it is the original, isn't it?
Yes, the original iron framework, the corrugated sheets, that's original.
You really get a sense of it, don't you?
Oh yeah, definitely.
How come it was down there and then woof by magic it's here?
Well, the building firm, the local building firm, Lydiard's, they were charged with the dismantling and demolishing of the camp. Well, they saw this one being the biggest of the huts and thought, we can use this for ourselves. So in the 1950s, when this all happened, they dismantled it, moved it up here, and it became their base of operations for their building firm.
The structure of this Nissen hut helps us understand what we're finding in the ground. Do you recognise that? These are the things that we've found on site that hold the exterior cladding on. And that's what they would have looked like originally. But not all the huts were the same construction, and Karenza thinks she's found evidence of something different in her test pit.
We started off with the one test pit. We had no sign of anything there, so we then decided we'd extend it into a bigger area, and as soon as we started widening that trench, we found a post hole. But a post hole, not like we're used to on archaeological sites when you just get there. So this is a hole that has clearly had a timber post in it and then filled with concrete around. So you can see the square outline of the timber post, and we've even got a bit of the timber in the bottom with a couple of nuts and bolts on it still, which is fantastic.
So is this another Nissen hut?
Well, it's not the same design. Some suggestion it might be a tar paper hut, so that's where it's built of timber essentially, and you've just got that tarmac kind of, black waxy oil stuff that you use to do the flooring on the rest of it, and you're just using that to do the walls. The Americans put them up, and they were quicker to put up, and you could get more people in them.
It's another piece of the puzzle as we build up a picture of life in the camp. But with just one day left and rain forecast, everyone's anxious to get some results.
Well,
first find of the day, and we've got a watch.
Wow, look at that.
We've popped it in a protective case, but as you can see, I thought at first it might be a wrist compass, but on further inspection, when it came out of the hole, the back came off, and as you can see, we've got a very nice, delicate watch mechanism in there. It's a good thing because it allowed the finds team to look at the back, perhaps maybe find a date. But one of the things I wanted you to see is just feel the weight of that.
Wow, that's really got some weight to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a cheap Timex. The other interesting thing, you'll notice that lovely green, yellow patination there on the face. I think that might be irradiated paint.
And that would have made the face luminous?
Yeah. Something we need to consider when we hand it into the finds tent and the team start to conserve it.
We were in Pentaco yesterday doing the survey, and this came up. Can you let us know what it could be?
It's the tail section of an anti-tank rocket. This is an inert practice example, but you can see this exactly the same for this one.
Cassie, I hear you've had some success already this morning?
Yeah. First find out this morning, and it's going to be a good morning, is this cap badge.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So what badge is that then?
Royal Engineers. It's got the cipher for Old King George in it, so almost certainly wartime. So Dan reckons he has heard that the Royal Engineers actually built the camp, so we might actually have the construction crew, which is really nice.
Someone must have got into trouble for losing their badge though.
I think so. It's even got the fastening plate on the back, so how they managed to lose that, I don't know.
Yeah, they went down there. There's a reason I worked on that for 2 days. I can feel it.
And we can really see the outline of the Nissen huts the engineers built now that they're cleaned up. Tell me about these things over here.
Well, you can note all these little concrete squares, and they're really significant because those are the post pads onto which this Nissen hut, the accommodation block, sat. The semicircles of corrugated iron would have sat on each of these concrete pads. They're missing in some area because the football pitch, when it was graded away, will have knocked them away. But we've got the rest of them so we can say the exact shape of the structure.
And what's that little poking around here?
So the poking around, the little grovel here is, in fact, there is a darker stain running along here, and that's the drainage channel. So you've got a rudimentary way of keeping the waterlogging away from the building, and rain was always a problem with these things. They've cut a drainage channel, and it's now filled with this detritus, which is the remnants of the building.
Oh, I see. So actually this bit would have been outside of the building.
Exactly that.
So after all these years doing archaeology, you would have thought, I wouldn't have assumed that the trench is actually the shape of the building.
That's right. Well,
so the building starts there. There's the gully outside, like you would have had in an Iron Age hut or a Saxon hut.
I'm calling it our villa because it's a nice rectangular shape with finds in it.
Yeah. Let's go around the corner, shall we? Oh, there's another pad here.
The pads at the end are
these are beautiful,
they're
aren't they?
really big.
Yeah.
The corner ones especially, because that's the load-bearing element. This is the final bit, the end of the building, and between these two is where the back door ran. We're getting lots of finds connected with the back of the building, with window glass and roof nails and tar paper to make it waterproof. So all the things you'd hope from a construction layer, and that represents basically the clearance of this hut in the 1950s after the soldiers and indeed the locals had moved out.
What about around the other side?
Yeah, it's replicating the same sort of thing. Another drainage channel going along, and you can see we've got more of the post pads here.
Having a good time here, boys?
It's brilliant. Absolutely.
Cool, look at that. That looks interesting.
Well, this is the tar paper that would have hopefully made this a bit more habitable. It's a waterproof membrane. It's quite a thick old thing.
Where do you stick it?
You stick it between the corrugated sheets, so it's like an underlayer, effectively, to stop the rain getting through, and hopefully making this place watertight for the 16 soldiers that would have been in this. And they do complain about how cold this place was. They had a pot-bellied stove to keep them warm, but they've got little mattresses that they fill with local straw. You can imagine the privations of sleeping in something like this. It's like my tent, Tony, to be honest, really cold.
Well, the officers are up in the posh house, like I am.
Well, you see, that's rank though, Tony, that's rank.
And it's still there, isn't it?
Never escaping it.
There was a hut under there, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a really significant hut under this. And we excavated this a few years ago, and this was the structure that was used, we think, by the sergeants and the non-commissioned officers of Easy Company.
Oh, so is this where the famous
That's the
photo was
photo with
taken?
Carwood Lipton, that the guy involved with the supposed
Yeah.
mutiny against Sobel lived just here, underneath these turfs. Tony.
So he's outside here somewhere. in
Outside
that-
with his platoon, and you can locate it precisely. We've excavated it. It's fairly similar to that, but a really important historic moment, especially for Easy Company, took place just here.
How many lads would have been camped around here?
Probably around 600, and that's a huge number of people. 600 in a really small field. Yeah, it must have been very intense living here amongst so many men. So you've got a brick foundation here, and these are basically replicating the concrete post pads that you saw over the other side.
Any finds?
There's been a few. You've got the roof nails from this thing, but actually, in past years, we found 2 dog tags around here, one of which was Able Company and one was Easy Company. And I think that basically reflects the fact that when they came back from Normandy, they were so depleted in terms of numbers that
They forgot about just keeping one company over there and another company here. It was all just mixed because there were
I think that's
far
it.
less
I think they've had to put it all together, and just that reflects the fact that there were so many casualties on D-Day, which is quite
It's
quite
poignant,
a powerful
isn't it?
thing.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
quite a powerful thing.
Our 3D graphics team, led by Danny, who's also a veteran, have been able to put together a reconstruction of how the field might have looked 80 years ago. And if the weather was anything like it is today, it would have stood them in good stead for the conditions in Europe. We've had to stop filming because it's a hailstorm, a huge hailstorm. It's time, team. The men in the camp had no idea when they were going to be called on or what exactly their mission was to be. But as spring turned to summer, it became obvious that their date with destiny was on them.
Cases and cases of artillery ammunition appeared, as if by magic, in the woods and vacant lots along the highways. And on May 28th, just as I was dressing for another pass to London, the telephone jangled in the company headquarters. Non-coms rushed to the CPs, and the news was out.
Janine has been sorting through the extraordinary collection of finds that we've unearthed from the field, and has picked out a few that speak to her. This has survived well, isn't it? Where did you find it?
This was found in Trench 1, or the boys found it in Trench 1, right near the knife, and it's a piece of paracord from the parachute, so it survived really, really well, and it goes nicely with the parachute we found in 2019 and the reserve pull from the parachute.
One more thing, I'm not going to pick this one up, I just touched that. Do we know what that is?
This is when there was a set of boots issued, 43, 44, for the Americans. And this is the eyelets for the boot. They had 2 buckles that went across the top there. And this buckle went across like this way, and this was the eyelets that attached to the buckle, so you could tighten it or loosen it depending on how fat your ankle was, I guess. So yeah, and these are actually made in Providence, Rhode Island, because they're nicely stamped on the sides here. And we've also found, which is quite cool, we found this buckle and we didn't quite know where it was from. But when the helmets came, I do a bit of show and tell, on the inside here, on the back rear
Identical.
it's from the M1 helmet.
Oh, that's good, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah,
it's great. So it sort of shows up nicely. And you can sort of fit everything in with context about where it's all from.
Oh, wow. This is really heavy, isn't it?
And it's some weight, but just imagine jumping out of an airplane, holding something like that, and all the rest of your weaponry and your equipment, and then having to fight the Germans at the end of it all.
On May the 30th, Webster and the men drew their full quota of ammunition, left these fields, and moved on to Up Potteries in Devon to be dropped into battle. Webster's description of the moment that they all left on their way to D-Day is really beautiful. These were young men who didn't know whether they would ever come back here or whether they'd even survive.
There were many tears. Good luck and God bless you, the people called, as we drove through the dappled sunlight to keep a midnight rendezvous with the Germans in the green fields of Europe.
And 80 years on, as our time in Aldbourne also comes to an end. The team gathers to pay tribute to the men who came before us. And we leave with the words of Webster etched into our memories.
I think of Aldbourne in nostalgic moments. I close my eyes and see the village green sloping away from the church. A paratrooper's ghost stands guard at the gate to the officer's mess. His overcoat is buttoned to the chin, the collar turned up against the cold. He snaps to attention and gives a rifle salute to the officers killed in action, who walk briskly by on frost-whitened cobblestones on their way home from a party at their mess. The clock in the ancient belfry winds up and begins to strike midnight, and the sound of hurrying footsteps comes up the lane from the Hungerford Road. The guard tingles. It is the relief. The clock strikes 12. The guard vanishes. The officers are dead. Horses whinny in the box stalls where the soldiers slept. Aldbourne sleeps. The 506th, a memory.
Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.